We are live. Good evening, Alison McDowell. How are you?
It's good to see you again, Kevin.
This is our second round. I wanted to make sure we got you back on because what you're offering the world is just amazing. You know, this whole discussion about how the capital markets and how the financial industry is now going to be playing a major role with big pharma and big tech to really basically control and analyze and manage everything that we do, and how this is just a continuation of the young man that you introduced me to, Leroy, the whole process of racial capitalism.
Yep.
And you gave me that young man to look at, and I was amazed by his work. But I wanted to say something personal to you. You know, we live in a world right now that truth has no value. That's what they would like us to think.
Unless it's on blockchain.
Right. And if you talk about anything truthful to help people, to motivate people, to galvanize people, to fight back against tyranny, to do all those things, they have the audacity and the hubris to say that you should be censored, you should be criminalized, you should be demonized. And I got to tell you, it's very interesting because I was thinking today about veterans and people that have fought all of these wars. And, you know, my community, I believe we're some of the most patriotic people in the world. Never mind World War II, never mind the American War, never mind the German, the Civil War. Just never mind. We fought in every war in this country. We are the most patriotic people on the planet. Now, did we get our just deserved, what we deserved? No. We already know that. Did we get our full citizenship? No. But what I do know is that those veterans, white and black and German and Jew and Irish and, all of those other nationalities, we fought for what? Our freedom to speak the truth, not to be censored. I mean, those people gave up their lives for this country. And now I must say that we no longer live in America. I did a brief speech about it's time for us to stand today, and it's being censored. I'm all right. I understand that. It's being shadow banned because what I was trying to say to people, it is time to stand up. It is time now. No more keyboard warriors. They're now going to control everything we do. They're going to control how we breathe. They're going to control how we eat. They're going to control how we make love. They're going to do everything. And they've weaponized this virus in a way that even I think some of the most intelligent people I know have brought into the three-card Monty. And I got to tell you, you're taking a big risk, Alison. And I got to tell you, I think I'm more excited now because I see so many people like you crossing that river. I gave this speech at this university the other day about what it means to cross the river, to leave our comfortability. Because Black Americans, when we came into this country, we came here as slaves, and we were in the bottom of a ship. We've crossed the ocean to get here to be in bondage. But to be free, right, you had to cross that river. You had to seek your freedom. You had to cross that river to be free. Martin Luther King, Malcolm X, Ida B. Wells, Fannie Lou Hamer. So many Americans had to cross that river to fight for us. Cross that river to seek God's face, to find God's courage. And I think it's time that, we stand up like they did. We stand up like they did. So we all are crossing that river together. And you and I and so many great Americans are doing that. And I am so proud to say that it's great to have you as a friend. Oh. And it's great to have you lend your voice to this fight because guess what? We are on the right side of history. We've seen what the government has done to us. We saw COINTELPRO. Black people have seen that. We've seen driving while black. We've seen all of the horrors. But you have Black Americans that are allowing themselves to put the mask of shame on. Just 2 years ago, if a Black man drove in his car with a mask on and went into a bank, he would be shot. And this has nothing to do with racism. It has something to do with the culture of this country. Think about that. Just 2 years ago, if I walked in a bank with a mask, I would be shot. So right. The globalist is telling you it's all right, telling you don't visit your mother, don't visit your father, don't love your loved ones, watch what you watch on TV, don't convene. That's all planned.
Yeah.
But the thing that they're doing, the most damage that they're doing, and we're all helping them because we're not fighting back and we're not standing, is to our children.
Yeah.
To our babies. And this whole educational system in this country has always been a criminal organization to me. And the public unions, teachers unions, have always been the gatekeepers for that particular, criminal activity. And now our kids are going to be annihilated. They're now told that they are the carrier of diseases. They're now told to stay home and don't socialize and communicate because you're going to die. They're now being told that in order to go back to school, you have to get this shot. What I'm saying to you is this is just a continuation of what the public health and big pharma has done to us from the beginning. Yeah. That's why our kids are chronically ill. That's why autism is going to wipe out 2 generations of our Black men. And these failing schools have been failing under Black leadership.
It's true. So, I mean, I think a lot of people are not realizing that the trauma that's being inflicted on the whole population, but especially children. I mean, children who don't have life experience to at least imagine that it's going to be over. Those of us who are in our 50s or older, we can at least sort of entertain the idea that like we have some perspective of time. But imagine what it's like to be a 3 or 4-year-old, right? Like a third of your life is spent. There was that little video clip of a little toddler running around and everything was like a hand sanitizer online. She'd like touch anything outside. She was just walking around pretending, like, because kids pretend, right? They mimic what they see. And like every single thing was a hand sanitizer. She'd, push the hand and then walk away. And it was just this whole clip of like her wandering around outside, imagining that she was using hand sanitizer everywhere. And it was devastating. But that's, my focus has really been around the financial markets and how the surveillance ties in with these financial markets and the creation of a game, this new type of game around us. And this is a game that wants to turn, humanity, especially vulnerable populations, historically targeted populations, Black people, Indigenous people, people from the global South into these commodities, to reimagine them once again as a new type of commodity in a world where physical labor and even mental labor or social labor is no longer valued because we're handing it to robots. And so the children are the ones that are being targeted because really the goal is to raise them within a digital construct so they don't know anything else, so that they can't, so that like in these early years, they're traumatized to the extent they can't imagine what the real world is like. And that it is a place that you could have, care and love and society and community and creativity. It's not, all of that is supposed to be erased. And in that erasure is creating these social impact markets and trauma. A lot of people understand the trauma, but they don't understand that it's going to be a game.
Can you do me a favor? Can you talk about the social impact structure? Because when we use these terms, some people that are online don't understand. Let's slowly walk ourselves to why I wanted to call this education the further construction of the Black child. So can you spend a couple of minutes there, please?
Sure, yeah. So this is based on, essentially, it's a new way for global finance, transnational global finance. So these are the largest asset holders in the world. It's not any given country. It's a global, and that's why this had to be, the trigger of that was this global health scenario, because it's a global problem. And it's a way of packaging people as debt commodities, essentially, using data analytics and predictive analytics to imagine people not as sort of sacred, beloved, like children, like gifts, that are just waiting to develop as full-blown, wonderful human beings, but as a burden on society. It's a deficit model. And if they can frame everyone as a maximum burden on society, whether you're chronically ill, right? You mentioned autism, people who maybe are vaccine injured. If you imagine them as a burden on society because they've gone through trauma and they have need mental health support, right? They're a burden on society because they maybe are in addiction and they don't have stable housing, or they don't have stable employment, and so they need food assistance. all of these things that normally would come from the state, we realize that we've been living in a position of austerity globally, where the most people holding the most concentrated wealth in the world are not paying into the taxes. And I mean, it's always been an unfair system, but literally when you're looking at, you know, Amazon and people who are hiding their wealth so that they're not actually paying into the system, that is going to create an opportunity through these, it's called pay for success or social impact bonds or development impact bonds, for the very same people who are hoarding wealth to reframe themselves falsely as benevolent investors, benevolent philanthropists who are unlocking their capital into these markets to ameliorate the misery that people are in. Now, it's only going to be ameliorated. It will never be eliminated, because they've created global markets to profit people from the misery. So if you're making money off of misery, you have no incentive to eliminate the misery, just to simply manage it. And so essentially what they are doing is using these technological systems that are now very highly evolved with sensors, everything from your phone to your Fitbit watch to now, you know, Elon Musk is talking about brain implants, to neural dust, to smart sensors in your environment, in your street lights, in your trash cans, in your pavement, in the paint. Everything it's a panopticon. Everything is watching you and recording you as an object. I was speaking with someone earlier and they were talking about thingification. The human beings are being turned into things. We're being thingified in essentially a global panopticon, and that our misery is quantified. And then in this amelioration of it, the misery will be reduced somewhat. And in that space in between full-blown misery and slightly reduced misery, the person who funds the solution that reduces the misery gets paid back for their investment if the data shows on a dashboard. If people live on a dashboard and they can be tracked as data, that slight reduction in misery and the slight reduction of a burden on the public coffers allows the investor not only to recoup their investment, but a slice of profit that is negotiated with the government.
So let me get this straight. So right now, and I hope I do a good job on this because you're so much smarter than me. But
no, I've just been learning this language for a while.
The Black child who's already in substandard education environment, probably would never be the most effective. We're not developing the most effective human capital in our communities, but they're now going to be commoditized for other groups to be able to make money, make capital on the backs of them controlling the overall system under the guise that they're doing something good for Black children, Latino children that live in rural America. Because we should be mentioning those white kids in those rural part of the country that no one's talking to right now.
And indigenous children, particularly, the suicide rates are incredible. I mean, they're soaring, and addiction. Yeah.
So here we are, Black Americans, a bottom caste, Black Americans, no economic power, Black Americans translate their Black power through somebody else's success and wealth, right? So here we are in the negative, and now they're forcing our Black children, Latino children, white children in rural America to do distant learning, but really priming them, right, as a commodity for their business.
Right.
Wow.
So
Did I do it right there? Did I do it right there?
Yeah, no, it's very good. Yeah, no. And I will say the one thing, so these are based on these outcomes-based contracts. So the people who are hoarding the wealth withhold paying their fair share back into the coffers because everyone knows, like, if you go back to agriculture, right? Like a right relationships is that you put back, right? It's the honorable harvest. You take and then you give. Like, you have to compost and replenish the soil. If you just take, then you end up with the Dust Bowl, right? But these wealth hoarders are just hoarding. They're never giving back, and they're pulling more and more profit out of the most oppressed communities. So until the governments go totally bankrupt, they will negotiate with the governments for these investments to get a little bit back. But the money, just to be clear, is not in the deal itself. Because people say, well, Alison, why would they go to all this trouble, these 2,000 asset holders, the Impact Management Project, set up the United Nations Sustainable Development. Why would they go to all this trouble? I can't imagine there is that much money in privatizing social welfare. Like, why would you do it? It's not that profitable. Couldn't you do something else? And what I found is that when you peel back, the people who are investing this, on the one hand, it is some venture capitalists who are creating companies to do the data mining, right? They're investing in computers, they're investing in software, they're investing in cloud systems. And as reprehensible as that can kind of be, there's a thing, right? They're supposedly building companies. Hedge funds are a tier below that, right? Because they don't actually make anything or do anything. It's simply gambling. And what's going to happen is the debt that is associated with advancing the money to do the social welfare, they don't just give that money and let it sit. It's like the bank. You put your money in the bank and then they go invest it other places. It doesn't sit there all the time. The hedge funds are going to securitize the debt and trade it and gamble on it.
Well, that's the same thing they did in 2008 and 2009.
Right. For the mortgage.
Housing market. Right. Absolutely.
Yeah. So now instead of packaging debt tied to housing, we're going to package debt tied to pre-K. We're going to package debt tied to career and technical education. We're going to package debt tied to behavioral programming and social emotional curriculum in schools. We're going to maybe package debt tied to giving telemedicine in schools and digital therapeutics and video game therapies. All of that gets packaged as debt. So if you imagine that the profit is dependent on maximizing the amount of debt that's advanced, that means that the children have to be framed as the largest burdens possible. They can't be seen as cherished, amazing beings.
So they have to be
perceived of as deficits. Deep.
So they have to be in a distressed marketplace for the hedge fund to come in and say, "Listen, we're going to place value on these people.
Yeah, we're going to fix you.
I got you."
And then eventually, what we're looking at with like potential population level bioengineering with these gene therapeutics, which is really what these injections are. They're gene therapies for healthy people, right? That's what we're looking at. If those are administered in school settings or educational settings, it's not even covered under HIPAA. It's FERPA, which Obama gutted. And it was gutted.
It's what?
It's called FERPA. So it's the Family Education Rights Protection Act. But it's kind of like HIPAA, which is the medical records protection. But FERPA is much weaker. And Obama put all these loopholes in so it can be used for impact investing. And that's why what we're hearing is that there are great needs, and I'm in no way minimizing the need. The need is there. The needs are real. The needs are deep. The needs are growing, right? Of families who are in poverty, who don't have an economic standing as the fourth industrial revolution rolls out. It's going to get worse. The schools then become the traps. Because once the kids are in the schools, and now we're even seeing, in DC, they're trying to advance legislation where 11-year-olds give consent to be vaccinated without
they're not advancing it. They passed it.
Yeah. So that data is ripe for these social impact markets. And furthermore, all of this is really based in eugenics. And, as much as we're talking about the disruptive innovation of biotech and nanotech and bio-nanotech. And, oh, it's amazing. It's so disruptive. Look at all this value. I mean, I just got back from Utah, and the state of Utah has 1,000 life science companies. 1,000, like it's called Bio Utah. So think about that for a minute. What do companies need to succeed? Like, they have to sell their product, right? I mean, if you have a company, you're not going to succeed unless you continue to grow your market share. You've got 1,000 life science companies. So that means essentially either you've got to have a whole lot of sick people and more every day to keep growing your market, or you're going to have to start selling products to healthy people.
Well, it's very interesting that you say that. I was saying to a group of people the other day, I said, do you understand that you're being primed to get sicker?
Yeah.
So you take this shot, right? It doesn't stop transmission, right? But this gene therapy, right? This whole gene aspect that you just laid out,
right?
You're now going to be primed. So when the next flu season or the next, the next flu season comes around, you're going to get sick because your body won't be able to determine what it is.
Right.
And
then you'll need more product.
Thank you. So what you're doing is you're actually becoming a slave to Big Pharma. But not only that, you're destroying the future generations of your community, because now your body, your particular body, whoever took the shot, now can't produce the value of, for instance, have children, have healthy children. I mean, think what you're doing to yourself.
I mean, we're creating a profit center in sickness. And then ultimately, and you know, I will say when I was going out there, a lot of the impact investing space, you know, I'm in Philadelphia. It was advanced by Judith Rodin when she left being the president of the University of Pennsylvania, and she became the president of the Rockefeller Foundation. And as the president of the Rockefeller Foundation, she really laid that out. And she was very connected with the University of Pennsylvania health system. And David Cohen, who is a high-level executive with Comcast, because this is all the bio-nano things is running through the telecom companies, and they were collaborating in the hospital system, right? So you've got impact investing, you've got telecom, you've got medicine, and then you've got Wharton, which is the University of Pennsylvania's business school. And they really have robustly developed impact investing along with, you know, Duke and Harvard and Stanford, and, you know, a number of University of Chicago, these institutions that are advancing the impact investing space. But Wharton's new build, I mean, it's not new anymore, but it's maybe 15, 20 years old. Their building is named after the Huntsman family. And the Huntsman family, he was a former governor of Utah.
Yeah.
And so they're very, you know, wealthy, connected family. And they are funding genomics research, right, for cancer. But guess where the Huntsmans got all of their money? In plastics and styrofoam. They're a chemical company.
Killing the environment.
So their like first big break was the clamshell things for the Big Macs. Like that's the kind of styrofoam they were selling. So they made a fortune selling things that ultimately have made the environment toxic. And then they do use their fortune to fund philanthropy, which is about genomics for cancer. But then these genomics are then leveraged into creating new markets in gene therapies, which ultimately are advancing a eugenics program towards straight up transhumanism.
Now, just stay right there with eugenics, because, you know, I believe that this is eugenics 2.0.
Yeah.
I believe that Margaret Sanger and a host of friends from the early 1930s must be rolling over in hell laughing that Black Americans are participating in the genomics, I'm tongue-tied today, program, right? Eugenics program. So think about this. You have Black Americans, right, going into our communities and saying it's all right to turn your body and your bodies over and commoditize your bodies for Big Pharma and destroy your children. I want to stay on the Black child right now, right?
Yeah.
Explain to me how this further destruction of the Black child is occurring in real time.
So if you understand that these human capital markets, like based in the education system, so the education setting, whatever that is actually going to look like moving forward, and it's hard to know, you know, is this going to look like a neighborhood school anymore? Or is this going to look like maybe a regional drop-in center where you go a couple times a month to check in with like your pathway coordinator? You know, because I fully believe that the idea of a regular neighborhood school, they intend for that to go away and that it to be predominantly digital. But they still do need something where FERPA would apply so that they can harvest the data, not only from the child, but from the family. Because the impact investing model that's coming out of the Aspen Institute and the Casey Foundation and a number of researchers, it's called like the 2-generation model, the 2-generation model. So everything's a vertical in the business. They perceive every social relationship, every family relationship, you know, every individual as a vertical option, right? So they're going to data mine not only the students, but the teachers. Like the teachers are a professional development data mining model. The students are a vertical. The family, people knew this early on with slavery and with the reservation system, is if you can use children as a weapon against the parents, right? If you can threaten someone with the loss of their child, right, or to harm their child, you can control those populations more readily. And it's a very sad fact.
And it's easy to do it to poor parents without research.
Right. Especially because the Child Protective Service system neglect is so broad, right? Neglect.
Do you know, I live in the city of Newark, New Jersey. We can have that discussion for another day. But right now, I was talking to a young man, Anton Willer. He's like my son and my nephew. And he has been telling me for over a decade about this transformation in education and how it was actually going to be utilized as a tool to further destroy, the Black child. Yeah. Education was the profit, going to be the new profit center. Back then, I mean, I'm talking about 15 years ago, 10 years ago, you're sitting around my kitchen table talking to me about it.
Right.
I mean, actually talking to me about it.
Right.
And so now, as an educator, and all of these educators that are out there, in particular Black educators, it must be frightening what they're seeing happening to Black children.
Right.
But the thing that I'm going to do tonight is challenge Black parents to say, are you kidding me? Are you not paying attention to this? I hate to be so harsh, but I'm that kind of parent. Yeah. I'm like, look, are you not paying attention? Do you understand what they're doing to your child? It's not about this weaponized virus. It's about what they're setting up by using this weaponized virus to keep you in fear, where you're not having these deeper conversations in your community. Your child, your Black baby, your Black son, your Black daughter, your Black they are now going to be further destroyed. And that is the plan of eugenics.
Yeah.
Stop them at birth, fool them at birth, abort their babies. And if we can't abort their babies within that environment that Brown versus Board of Education gave us some cuddly feeling that we're going into desegregated schools when we're more segregated than ever, because in the clause of Brown versus Board of Education, what does it say? With all deliberate speed. And that means you can take for whatever and every time you want to do what? Change your school system, which never happened because our schools are more segregated.
Right.
Now more than ever. So now they are priming us. Eugenics is so unique because they are now priming us, right, to be able to do what? Accept the fact that we're going to allow them to destroy our children. Now, this is what this young man was talking to me about this a decade ago. Right. Now, I've
been, in the Philadelphia public schools, which is, we weren't targeted by Mark Zuckerberg's money, but like we've been under, the raid, in the crosshairs for a long time. So we probably have, the school districts, the public school districts are in a similar situation, and they're broken on purpose. They're intentionally miseducated, like putting people in a position of not having resources, miseducation. And so in our city, it was a struggle at the time that we were going through it as parents between charter schools and neighborhood schools, right? So they break the public schools. The school districts don't meet their legal obligations for students with individualized education plans, students with special learning needs. They would rather have you take them to court, and the few parents who have the resources to actually prevail in court after months and months and months, they would rather just pay off those few parents than actually meet their obligation. And that's how it works, right? And so it's broken on purpose. Then parents who feel like they have another option might choose a charter school, might try to get an opportunity scholarship, a subsidized scholarship to the Catholic system or a private school. Like, there's all of these rankings. You're trying to like navigate this. And every parent, parents want the best for their kids. So we can't blame, I know you want to place the blame, but the system is broken. It's a very broken system. So people, like most people are trying, like pre-pandemic, to figure out what their options are.
Well, let me just tell you.
We're always meant to point fingers at the parents making the other choice. You're wrong. I'm right. You're wrong. And what I've realized is that throughout all of the systems, including homeschooling and unschooling now, once we get these digital vouchers, which will essentially mean unschooling in a global police state with drones and robot police dogs, right? That's what we're talking about, even within the unschooling, homeschooling community, that it's going to be AI feedback loops against and feeding children into a future where they're not valued for their knowledge or skills. In fact, they're valued to not be knowledgeable. They're valued to be compliant. That is the new currency. The currency isn't to be curious and engaged and a critical thinker. It's to be obedient and gritty and resilient and not and acquiesce. We're all in that boat, right?
Well, I'm not saying. Let me say this though. I'm not saying that I'm blaming parents. But what I'm saying to parents is that they're seeing it in real time.
Yeah.
I'm saying start the debate. I'm saying start the discussion. And if you don't know, you know, we do have access to brilliant minds across this world, but be open to the fact that this particular system is being designed to destroy the Black child.
Yeah.
It's a fact.
It's erasure. Yeah, it is.
Right, absolutely. So I'm not saying
it's a family with the child, because they are after the entire package of the family. Because what they want, they're not just after packaging, putting your kid on a pathway. They want to put you on a pathway too.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm saying, and I did a little speech today. I don't know what to call it, but I wanted to speak to America and speak to my community and speak to the people I care about. That it's time to stand. You see it. You see the censorship. Right. You see the manipulation on your TV every day with mainstream media. You see the narrative. It is about control. So all of the things we fought for are fought against: communism, Marxism, socialism, now capitalism, all failed experiments, right? We see it. Now, you don't have to be the brightest person on earth to know that, you know, you're not going to be allowed to go to the supermarket unless you can have a COVID pass that says that you have taken their daily virus. I mean, daily shot, I'm going to call it, right?
The 1,000 life sciences companies.
Right.
Sure that you're up to pay with your shots.
You won't be able to get on a plane because you have not conformed. You won't be able to get licensed. Now, if you don't see that, I'm afraid.
That's frightening, right? And I think many people are trying to get through their day, right? I mean, especially people who are already uncertain, who are already traumatized, who are already navigating really broken systems now after almost a year. To actually look at it, it's not easy. It's not. And, you know, I have the privilege of having time and having a buffer. I feel like I'm supposed to look at it, right? I'm supposed to try to interpret it for people and cut to the chase. Because what I realized with the education system when I was seeing that before COVID, that the plan was to unbundle schools, to have it like Pokemon Go, collect a skill here or there everywhere in the global police state, using augmented reality, which is developed pretty much by the CIA, you know, and the tech companies and the finance companies, that was going to be an open air digital jail that would, again, continue the racialization process, but now not only it would be global, it would be ubiquitous. And now potentially with biosensors where you're actually physically resonating with these 5 and 6G systems, that it wasn't just that, it was actually, I'm finding papers, like there's one on globotics. I encourage people to look up G-L-O-B-O-T, well, glow and then botics, G-L-O. But the United Nations put out this paper, and it's fairly recent, like the last 3 or 4 years. And they're positing this haptic, this not only globalizing you know, we know about globalized call centers, right? We know about globalized, a lot of the tech and coding industries, they log into dashboards and try to compete for work with people from all over the world. Now with remote robotics, the plan is in the next 5 to 20 years that they will increasingly, through augmented or virtual reality and these haptic controllers, you will be locked in your house operating a factory somewhere around the world, and you will compete for micro work. I mean, they call it micro work.
It's really interesting you say that. I have a grandson that's, you know, he's always gaming. Mm-hmm. So I walked in the house one day. I said, you know, every time I come here, you're playing this game.
Yeah.
I said, now let me ask you a question. Explain why. Oh, granddad, I like the game. I said, well, guess what? I know a lot of young men in this country, young women that are making millions of dollars playing this game. I said, we have to talk about what this game is going to be used for in the future. And I told him I was going to come over and talk to him about it, because I kept watching this and I'm like, this is very interesting. Yeah. So you're not reading a book. You're now online being taught some crap that I don't even understand anymore. And now they're all sitting in front of this screen getting indoctrinated to what the new world is going to look like, but not realizing that they're not going to have any power or even access to it whatsoever.
Well, so if we have a minute, I just want to go in. So virtual reality, you know, like the Oculus Rift headsets, which are, you know, one of the Microsoft's largest contractors on that is the Army. You know, it's military hardware, really. And, you know, ultimately, I think the goal is augmented reality. So not full in covering your face, but having like layers of data over your, you know, the Google Glass, but they would need to normalize it more. But the virtual reality, that headgear and then the haptics that you control actually register your positions of your body, your emotions, your eye movements, your heart rate, all sorts of things. And so they've actually developed something called XAPI, which will allow you to put on a virtual reality headset with controllers and do something and demonstrate a task that if you meet the framework that is expected, it will give you a badge, like ding you a point and go to your learning locker. Okay. And so there's a slide share that I found by a defense contractor. It's called JCA Solutions. And a lot of this is actually based out of Orlando. So it's military simulation hardware. In Orlando, it's like Disney and the military, like working in the Army Research Lab and Sandia National Labs. Elaine Rayborn is with Sandia National Labs, and she's a key player in, they call it transmedia learning. So it's like the simulations that soldiers do to, you know, in missions, right, to train on certain missions in virtual reality is now going to be used to run these new automated advanced manufacturing factories with telepresence labor. But so you put on the headset and the task in this slide share for JCA Solutions was that you would pet a dog correctly. That was their scenario. So they broke down what would it take to demonstrate, to earn a badge that you petted the dog correctly. You know, and they break it down into all the series of tasks, and then they score the kids. Did they do all of the steps? And they're like, well, do you have a kid who's afraid of the dogs, or who pets all the dogs? Or, you know, they would have all these things that you would not get the badge, but then there's one progression that you earn the badge. And so that is the kind of education that kids are going to start getting as soon as the price point drops low enough for these headset gears. And, you know, they started in the schools with Google Cardboard, and you're not even supposed to put those things on your eyes because it'll burn your eyes. It's like if you're 13 or younger, you're not even supposed to use those headsets because it'll mess up your vision and your vestibular sense. But so one of the biggest entities pushing virtual reality education is UNICEF, because these impact markets that I've talked about in human capital and managing the poor are aligned to the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, which if people haven't spent time to look at them, you might think, oh, well, that sounds laudable. I like sustainability. Like I like to be, you know, I like eating local produce and riding my bike and, you know, minimizing my amount of car use. And those all sound great. Me too, right? I like living in a city. I don't mind but the reality is it's going to be weaponized against large sections of the global population, the poor, because they're going to be data markets. And so everything becomes a number. Your poverty becomes a number. Food access becomes a number. Healthcare becomes a number. Your education becomes a number. Well, gender equity becomes a number. Opportunity gaps. Everything is a number, which means you are under surveillance.
So is that
enabling global surveillance of the poor?
Okay, so on global surveillance is one thing, but are you saying that through that process, they're placing value on us? What our value is?
They will predict it in real time. Okay. They will predict it and track it in real time. So they will make a guess based on the data they have as a benchmark starting point. And
can I say this to you?
That will be unborn children.
Can I say this to you? You know, I am so happy that we met several months ago, because you have opened up all of our eyes to what the real issues are in education, and the long-term damage it's going to have on not just our children, but us as a society. And, you know, your voice is so powerful. I'm listening to you and I'm like, I have so much more homework to do. Like I mean, I research your stuff sometime. I'm like, my head is bursting. You know, I can't read another book. You know, I read all day, but you really have outlined what that new slavery looks like.
Yeah.
I
mean, so you're earning badges, right? And I will say this Globotics paper, again, out of the United Nations, you know, this isn't a fringy thing. They actually said, so if you imagine what happened with like Fukushima, right? Like they sent in robots to go do the cleanup. So it starts with the drone warfare, right? And Obama was a key leader in that. And then it starts with Fukushima cleanup. And then it's like, well, we used it for that. We can use it for other things. They said, well, we can use robots for technician checkups of the cable under the ocean, right? Okay, we'll do it for that. Well, how about, and this is literally in the paper, they said, well, we could do on the low end, we could have people in Kenya through robots cleaning hotels in Oslo.
Wow.
Okay. And then they said, well, we could have people in Mexico running lawnmowers for lawns in Texas while they're sitting in Mexico.
So you mean to tell me the majority of the world is going to be in poverty and being managed by the hedge funds and by the globalists? And there's going to be a few people that are going to be given permission to live.
Well, the data analysts, I mean, if they're able to pull it off, and I will say this, I'm not acquiescing to this future at this point, right? I'm not saying that they will definitely be able to pull it off, to scale it. I think most people would resist this future. Who wants to say, okay, my child locked in a freight container and they're going to be cleaning robotic hotel rooms? I mean,
Alison, do you really believe that people will resist it?
I don't think it ends this way. I'm not going there. I think we are in a spiritual engagement. And
you know what? I agree with you. I just asked that question because I can be quite cynical in my family sometimes. You know, I'm sorry. I just wanted to add, I do believe that. I do believe that.
I have to hold on to that.
I know. And you know what?
I mean, people are disappointing. I have to say, like, I do get disappointed, but at the same time, you know, I'm just one little person over here, and I have people email me and say, wow, like I went all over Salt Lake City, the Wasatch Front.
I saw that.
And I just did the live video. And I said, look, where does evil live? It lives in an office park. It looks like this, right? Somebody's going in this office park. What does Bluffdale look like, right? Like what is a data center that the NSA has created that holds 100 years worth of data dust to profile us look like? I thought it was hidden far away in the hinterlands, right? I thought, like, when I saw it, there's a great video.
Can you go back to that? Because, you know, I think people are saying, okay, you know, education, the further destruction of the Black child. And these are all of the systems that are going to be used, right? That's going to advance that. And the Black community, the Black community, Black Americans as a group, and, you know, rural Americans and other poor Americans, right, are going to now be commoditized, right? And now for their behavior. And, you know, go ahead. I just want to make sure, because every time a parent takes a child to the school, every time a parent turns on that computer, every time a parent hears that their Board of Education, right, is undervaluing, you know, what education is or should be, it's a crime against humanity. Right.
Well, and I would say it's education and this new economy, right? And that's what I realized. I said, you know what? Because even if you had the wherewithal to protect your child from a system that is intent on reducing them to a data dashboard, right? Even if you had the resources and the time and the strength of will to resist all of those, which isn't easy, but even if you had all those things and you shepherded that child for 12 or 13 years and brought them an education that you felt would empower them as an individual, and then you feed them into globotics and they've got no badges, and how do they compete for the micro work with the person down the hall in the other freight container who has the 200 badges to clean the hotel rooms with that AR VR headset? Like so we actually have to look at it as the continuum that is biocapitalism, of which they framed it already. They frame it out as lifelong learning. They have said, because you are never getting off the pathway. You are never going to not have to earn the next badge. You're going to be 72 and looking to figure out what the next 5 badges you have to earn, because some hedge fund is going to bet on you trying to get the badges. So the learning is like lifelong learning is going to be a horror. Like we imagine lifelong learning because I'm still learning stuff. I mean, we think how we imagine it. Like, oh, I like to learn new things. Like, oh, you know, I learned this today. That's exciting. No, that's not how they want you to learn. They want it as a process of both dispossession and accumulation. And so we have to reimagine and understand how they're looking at the education/training system, reskilling, middle skills, as their legitimation of state control over you for your whole life. And that's what we have to get. I mean, it's the children that we particularly have to care for because they're really after those kids. But we have to understand it's going to be a continuum. It's not going to be like, oh, you're 18, or oh, now you're 21, 22, or oh, you're 26 and you have your graduate degree and now you're set. It's not, that is not the world they're imagining. So if we want a different future, we are going to have to fight for all of it as a package, right?
That's right. So let me, if you were talking to a group of teachers that are, just for the, working in urban America, working in rural America, working anywhere at this point, what would you what would you tell them? What would you be saying to them? What would be your message to them?
I think that we have to unite to build a world that values life. Right? That values life outside of the commodity sector, that values that we have to revisit our understanding of success. We have to revisit our understanding of like material success, particularly, because on the one hand, I don't agree with the Sustainable Development Goals as they have been structured to channel global capital. But we are also in a moment where we are through consumer culture, especially in the global north, affluent, we are causing harm. So if we're reimagining the future, a future that aims towards healing, that aims towards a reckoning, a redemption, not just among people, but among us and our other beings. To me, and that's maybe the sacredness of it. That is an internal process as much as an external process. And, I will say I opened my talk in Utah and I did not know that they were the beehive state, which is interesting as we talk about the hive mind and hexagons and all these things. But I had a friend and he said, the narrative is important because they have weaponized narrative against us. They have weaponized narrative to enchant people. And people have been enchanted through fear and coercion and peer pressure. But we have to come up with another narrative. And so I opened my talk and I talked about, it was an article about the bees. And I work in a garden the other, part of my time when I'm not doing this stuff. And I love bees. I like native bees, particularly not just honeybees. My friend says that the honeybees are like, pawns of capitalism because they're just making honey and getting ripped off. But the solitary bees, the little wasps, like the little guys, the big guys, I like all those other kind of bees. And they said, well, look, we can use CRISPR and the chemical companies can genetically modify the bees. And we can modify the bees to live in the chemicals. Because look, all the bees are dying, the colony collapse disorder and all the, now we truck the bees around to do the industrial almond groves, right? And the industrial agriculture. And we could engineer those bees to live in this environment that we've made so toxic. And so I kind of opened and I invited people and I said, so just picture in your mind, there's two worlds. Like we have this choice. Are we a world where we have the hubris to play God and coercively re-engineer other organisms to live in the mess that we have made? Or do we try to reconcile and make that relationship right and take responsibility for past actions and fix it?
Well, it's something that you said about
not just bees, it's going to be us.
Well, you said something about God. It's very interesting. These, evil people, because we have to call them what they are, actually believe what God created is just not good enough. Yeah. God, whatever God created, your God species is not good enough. And we don't accept that. And we're going to change that. So we're going to be your new God.
Yeah. I think that's in the end, that's what they want. They want to play God.
They want to be our new God. So if there's like the conscious and unconscious, we're really having a battle. It is actually spiritual. I actually agree with that. And I do believe we are going to win. And I believe we are winning. That's why they're censoring us. But they want to be God.
Yeah, they do.
They're our new gods. Yeah. And they're saying, if you don't follow us, we will destroy you. We will take your careers away from you. We will take your children away from you.
Yeah.
We will take your life if we have to. It's not about being censored on Facebook. It's not about being censored on, Instagram. What they're doing is they're priming us, and they're saying what we failed at in the 1930s, what we failed at in the 1950s and 1960s and 1970s, we will not fail again. We will eliminate you. We will wipe you off of the planet if you don't follow our rules. And we have our government, and we have now our churches, the Vatican, the Black Church. Now we have our pseudo-intellectuals, the Black professionals. I'm talking about them.
I know.
They are now participating in the destruction of the Black race. They're now taking selfies and saying it is all right to turn your body over to your new God. So the Black church is now worshiping the government. The Black church is now representing Bill Gates, Fauci. You have Black ministers on with a war criminal talking about how we can effectively take a experimental vaccine that's not been approved by the FDA and to experiment on the Black body. We are at war.
Well, so I will say, if you understand that this is about, so it's control of reproduction, right? It's depopulation.
Okay, stop there for a second.
Yeah.
Say that again. It is control over what?
Control of reproduction.
There you go. I just want to make sure people understood that.
Yeah.
Now, can you say?
I haven't had a chance to talk about it in this interview, but the goal for tracking people as human capital to turn you into a data commodity, you need interoperable data. You can't have your data separated out. You can't have one spot for your education data and one spot for your healthcare data and one spot for your taxes and one spot for your voting and one spot for your land that you own, or if you own any property, and one spot for your, it all has to be aggregated so they can run the analytics. And so that's what the digital identity system is for. And that is why we're seeing the shift to electronic government that is framed as transparent and accountable and efficient, is that you will interface with your government as a digital citizen, as a digital entity, so that all of the welfare services that you avail yourself of become part of this interoperable data system. And I included this in my talk while I was out, but there was an article in 2002 about the surveillance state in the New York Times. And the author, like it was a long form article, and the second half was a lot about Oracle.
Yeah.
The company Oracle and Larry Ellison. And I did not realize fully that when they started that company, his key advance was interoperable data systems, the connection of databases to do this analytics. And the federal government has always been one of their major clients. The CIA was their first client. And, at the end of the article, it closed with the author of the piece saying, well, in the next 20 years, do you think there'll be one federal database? Do you think there'll be one federal one big giant, maybe global database? And Larry Ellison said, yes, I believe so. And I think it'll be an Oracle database and we'll track everything. So now Oracle is part of this coalition for the Vaccination Credential Initiative, along with Microsoft and MITRE and the Mayo Clinic and the Commons Project and Salesforce. Mark Benioff is a protege of Larry Ellison. And so, that article was 2002. Well, 20 years out, right? That's next year.
Wow. This is happening in real time.
It's happening in real time.
It's happening in real time. I got to tell you, I'm so blessed. I thank God every day that he guided me into this space in the last part of my life. And that all of the things that I've learned and all the things I've been a part of and all of the deeper conversations that, because, when we started talking about social impacts bonds, I said, I was pushing those bonds. Yeah.
But if you don't know all the pieces.
Right. But you're absolutely right. But I'm so happy that scientifically I understood what you were saying, and it actually changed me. I mean, everything I'm looking at that I was involved in all those years, I'm saying, oh my God. Yeah. I was complicit. I know.
But we don't know. You don't know until you know.
But I got to tell you, while I talk to people out there, I always start with that sometimes. Let me tell you where I was.
Yeah.
And let me tell you where I'm at today. Yeah. And I always like to do that. I like to tell people, I've learned so much this year. I've had the privilege of talking to some of the most unique, brilliant, compassionate human beings on the planet. And to be a part of that tribe is very exciting for me. You know, it's just a very exciting moment in history. You know, I mean, crossing that river I told you about, you know, moving past your comfort and seeking truth and crossing that river, that's freedom for me.
Yeah.
That's what Harriet Tubman was saying.
A lot of it is internal too.
Right.
I mean, it's hard because, I don't know, the last, 5 to 10 years has been really intensely, both from a media standpoint and a policy, and is to fragment, right? To say to the identity politics. And again, this is not in any way to minimize the past harms or the history. It's not to set that aside. But if you start to put yourself in a certain box or subsets of boxes, it's like more and more fragmented. And I have a friend, he was trying to figure out, like, how do we talk about it in images? And he said it's like a campfire, right? The coals, it had been cold that week. And he said, I bank the fire at night. So you put all the coals together so it heats it. And then, if you want to kill the fire, that you just spread it all out. And I feel like the last 5 to 10 years, people have been encouraged just to spread out and isolate yourself, if not physically, the pre-COVID, isolate yourself among other people, set yourself apart. How are you separate from people? Because you have these many aspects of your identity, right? And so you're now this subset. And then as a subset, that's going to feed into these impact markets. It's all feeding into the data analytics. And so the challenge is I think for those of us who can see, is to navigate holding on to our fundamental values, but putting ourselves out and engaging in conversations with people you might not have expected to have conversations with, to try to bank the fire again. Like, we have to find, and the coals that are banked back together may not be all the same, right? But the same in an identity politics framework, but they may be the same from a heart space. And for me, the people who invited me to Utah said, we need to talk about the children. We need to talk about the children. And, I've tried to talk to people across faith groups, right? Because I'm not somebody of a particular practice, but I do think I think I'm supposed to bridge, And so I've talked to people in Israel because it's their grandkids. And I've talked to people in Utah, and their state is really, framed by their relationship to the Church of Latter-day Saints. That's part of their politics really in that state, to say, are we turning children into commodities? Because it's not just going to be those children over there. It's going to be all of them. Once we have globotics, and once we, I was talking with someone who was involved in the space with Evernym, the digital identity. And he's like, I want it to be good. This is somebody who feels like they don't want it to be bad. I don't think most people go into these things wanting to do bad. They want it to be good, but they're just misguided as to the machine. They're part of a machine that is not going where they think it's going. And he said, but it could be like trust. And I said, no, because when we came up, you would get a job because sure, you had a basic credential, but you had an interview and people could see your heart. Like, they could see if you were teachable or interesting or good rapport, and then they would lift you up, right? They would bring you under their wing and teach you the business. And now they just want somebody with 75 badges because they only need you for a week. And then they need the person with 150 badges. And then maybe they needed somebody with 50 badges. Like, they don't care about you. There's no long-term relationship. And they kept saying the blockchain will be about trust. You'll know where to put your trust on the blockchain. And we have to build a world where, I'm not saying that the Black community really should have much trust. Like, there's not a lot, but we need to work towards real trust, like the healing part, and it's not going to be easy. None of it, I don't mean to imply that any of this is going to be simple. It's going to be really hard.
Well, Alison, I just want to tell you this. You're one amazing human being. And I think everybody that's listening to the show today, and everybody that's going to be listening later, I just want to thank you and tell you that I love you. I love what you're doing for humanity. I have a connection with people now, a deeper connection to people than I've ever had, because I see what these people are doing. I see the work that you're doing. And I got to tell you, I love you.
Thank you.
And you know what? You're sacrificing your life. You're sacrificing your family. You're doing all the things that all of the great men and women in my life I knew did. You know, and that's what breaks my heart, that people don't understand the sacrifice. You know, right now I could get up in the morning and the authorities could come to my door and I know how to handle it, but the average person doesn't. So they're going to be trapped in fear. They might come and take my kids. They might take my job. Well, that's going to be gone anyway if this happens. If this happens, if this moves forward, if we don't stand, it's going to happen. Right. And I got to tell you, you know, I will not be on Facebook any longer, probably after tonight and tomorrow, but I'm comfortable with that because I'm not going to commoditize their plan to censor me.
Yeah.
I'm just going to go out into the neighborhoods. I'm going to go across the country. I'm going to talk to people one-on-one because that's what we should be doing anyway.
Right.
We should be camping in these neighborhoods and having this conversation.
Yeah.
You know, it's gotten to the point that people text me. I stopped texting. I want to hear your voice.
Yeah.
I want to know who I'm talking to. And I got to tell you, I am not afraid of this because there were so many people that before me that put their lives and sacrificed their families and sacrificed all the things that they thought was important, but they found out in their heart the only thing that's important was to seek God's face, right, and use God's courage to fight against the tyranny at their time. The storm is not coming. The storm is here.
Yep.
I always say that Winston Churchill, he's got a dark side too. But it was interesting when he was warning the world about Hitler. He said, the storm is coming. So now we live in America, right? The most patriotic country in the world, the greatest republic in the world. And we are now in a communist state, a surveillance state, a state of fear. So all of those ancestors of mine that fought, all of your ancestors that fought for this free country, all of these people that fought in the military, they're just throwing it down the drain. And my question is, are we going to stand up against it? And you're one superhuman being. And I always try to keep my shows an hour because I like to talk.
I know this is short for me. I'm usually very long form, but
well,
maybe we can come back together and talk about virtual reality some more.
No, wait a minute though. We are coming. You're going to be a whole series for us. And I know it's difficult to get you and I together because I'm always on the road and doing that stuff. And you're now on the road. You're like, people want to hear your voice. You explain in this unique perspective of what's going to happen to us and what these markets are going to do, who's going to be participating in it, how they've been setting up with social impact bonds, who are all these financial people. Now you got the education cartel. Yeah. You got the financial cartel. You have the mainstream media being controlled, spewing all kinds of garbage at us every day. That's not journalism, folks. All of our traditional papers that we thought had credibility no longer have credibility. Your government is no longer working for you. They're your enemy. So listen, guys, we ain't got a lot of friends, but we do know one thing. We got God on our side. And I believe that. Yeah. But
I would encourage, like, I mean, for me too, it's people of faith around the world because it's global, right? And I know some people are like, mine's the right one, or, you know, like, but I really do feel like it's standing in your space of your sacred practice. Just like the farmers in India are doing that stand, right? And a lot of them are of the Sikh faith. They have their strength from the creator and the earth. I mean,
I have to say something to you. My nephew, Anton Willer, who's a brilliant educator, says he wants to interview you. You know what he says? What? We can take as much time as you want. Now, isn't he a bum? You know, he's terrible. But you know what? He's brilliant. He's been talking about, I'm telling you, he used to come across my dining room table and say, Kevin, let me tell you what's happening. He was prophetic. I got to give him credit.
It's been coming for a while. And like I said, you know, a lot of the no excuses schools that people felt like, well, this is a school that's safer, right? Because it's disciplined. But they were working on turning kids into robots and discipline, like the idea of grit and resilience. And it's not about you as a person. It's not about you being like vulnerable or cared for. It's about you being a robot. Like and once you look at globotics, that's what they're training these kids up for. It's both the end result and then the surveillance. And
what I would like to do is he's connected his whole peer group. They're all educators. If you don't mind, I'd like them to talk to you a little bit.
Yeah, no, I would love that, because I have a whole piece on this thing called Degrees of Freedom. They've put a low residency boarding school up. It was the Democracy Prep charter franchise, which I think serves, it's either Harlem or the Bronx. And their plan was to put these kids up on a train up to a mountain in Vermont, this Marlboro college that went bankrupt. And then they kind of remade it as, the kids are only up there as a boarding school for like small amount of time. I don't know, a couple weeks or a month at a time. And then they go back. But it's baked in with wraparound services. And when they're doing the boarding program, it's AI and virtual reality. And like I said, the UNICEF is advancing the virtual reality in Africa in particular, and with Bridge Education International, which this guy Seth Andrews is connected to. He was doing it in Liberia. And UNICEF is funding several pilots. One of them is called Nubian VR. And they're graphic.
Nubian VR?
Nubian VR. Yeah, Nubian VR. And the kids have these headsets, and it's graphically a fascinating image, and I'd love to deconstruct it with you. But they, when I am able to pull it up, but essentially they're trying to disconnect these children from their senses. And the screens and the virtual reality have this blue light that suppresses melatonin. And that's the pineal gland. And they talk about the pineal gland as being sort of the seat of the sacred. Like that people who understand like the hormone, like that is sort of like the third eye, or your sense is the pineal gland, and plus sleep regulation. So they're actually slapping these headsets on these kids, and it's removing them from the real world, and also suppressing how their body chemistry works in a way that.
Wait a minute. Wait.
I know, it's a lot. No, I never thought I would have to talk about this. This is crazy.
I'm laughing because you don't know how mentally ill I am. I'll be reading this stuff for the next month. And I'll be downstairs at my dining room table having wine, arguing with Anton for 4 hours. Like, what the? You don't know this house.
Nubian VR, look it up.
I know, but just think about the word
Disney
Nubian.
is the #1 funder of the UNICEF Innovation Fund.
Who is it?
Disney.
Okay, so think about what you're saying. Think of the word Nubian.
Yeah.
Black.
Yeah, it's in Africa. Yeah. They're slapping the things on the kids. And in fact, one of the other programs, similar program, virtual reality, and it also targeted at Africa, they said, well, those kids aren't going to learn to read. And it was actually going to be gestural coding, so that they could somehow code by just moving their hands. And they wouldn't even read. It would just be like moving their hands, I guess. That's the future they're imagining. A post-literate, where children are just machines. Really?
But isn't this the setup now with distant learning? Yeah.
I mean, the next thing is wearable technology, and it actually is eating your soul. I mean, the person who hosted me on my recent trip was trained in Waldorf education, and their stuff, it's relational, it's artistic, it's using your hands, it's very engaged, and the virtual reality, the screen-based is the antithesis. And, she said it's almost like feeding your energy into this anti-life system, into a dead system. It's almost like a golem or something. Like, I know people have talked about, I don't know which scripture it is, but like combining clay and metal or something, like that these nanoparticles is like this cyborgization that they're aiming for. It's a non-human paradigm. Right. And I think some people who are coming from this transhumanist will say, well, it's making us superhuman, right? As opposed to that, it's putting us under control of these technologies outside ourselves and outside of natural systems. But wow. It's pretty intense. And so this, like I said, this program up in Marlboro, well, it was the Marlboro College. It's called Degrees of Freedom. And the person who initially was telling me about it, they make it sound like a pun, like a degree, like you get a degree and you earn your freedom, right? But degrees of freedom is also like range of motion. And so like the degrees of freedom, like in these headsets, like how much freedom do you actually have in this virtual space, right? Like you're confined, really. Your body it's almost like your body, you're like wearing your prison. Because, they're developing smart shirts and smart shoes and VR headsets. And
so our title, education, the future destruction of the Black child. Yeah. Well, my God,
Yeah.
My God.
It's deep.
It's deep.
Now, and they want, I do, you know, and it's hard, I have to say, because on the one hand, I'm not dismissing the need, but the system is so broken. If these several hundred, you know, 100 times over billionaires are holding all of the globe's wealth, that's the problem, right? I mean, that you can make children behave, you can make them earn a desk, you can make them conform to a military framework, you can make them, put them in virtual reality, but it's not going to, they're not going to be able to earn that money back. The goal isn't for us to be able to regain that wealth back into the general population. And whether that wealth is held by someone in China or the Vatican Bank or a Swiss financier or, you know, Jeff Bezos or Bill Gates, their goal is to always get more. It's not to, and the give back only is predicated on these impact investing, which is just a fake out to get the more back under a different pretext. So that's why I feel like in my heart that it's a sacred engagement that we're part of, because if you look at it from the material realm strictly, we are outmaneuvered, you know, like we're never going to have that much money or that much military power or this many bioweapons or this many lawyers, or like, it's going to have to be something else. But I think if we're coming at it from a place of the right relationship and building a global network, like for me, it's almost like a global peace movement against artificial intelligence, like against this anti-life program that's backing the financiers. But it's almost, to me, like sometimes I even wonder if AI is already in charge. Like, has someone flipped the switch? Has it gone there already?
Well, it's really interesting because, you know, how they're selling transhumanism is something, it's good for you.
Yeah.
You know, oh, it's going to be great. It's going to extend your life. You know, this whole idea that technology should be used to extend one's life. So, you know, never mind the life cycle we're on. That's not good enough that God has us on. We're going to extend it. We can make your life better. You can live to be 120. You know, we can.
But you will never have your own agency. Yeah, like, you will never make your own choice. And, you know, it's hard because people are imperfect. Like, we're all imperfect. We all make mistakes. We all say things we regret. We do things we regret. Like,
hey, look, hey, Alison, I do that on a regular.
Well, you know, and I think right now we feel like a lot of us who are trying to wake people, like bring this awareness, feel frustrated with people. And you're like, I'm trying to save you from the robots, you know, wake up and talk about synchronicity. So I'm on the plane and, you know, I'm reading my book and of course, you know, it's like 6 feet, everybody's 6 feet, don't take your masks off. And then you're on the plane and you're like this with, like, you know, like for 4 hours, you know, and I'm like, if it really isn't that bad, you wouldn't be packing the plane.
I've traveled a lot this year, but what I want to do is
it was reading Frankenstein.
He was reading Frankenstein.
He was reading Frankenstein. And I looked over at her at the end because she wasn't really making eye contact, but I said, you should look up the Internet of Bodies. It's related.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, listen, I want to close out with this from Martin Luther King, you know, because everybody's always talking about Martin Luther King. I dare say a lot of people don't even know what his journey is. He's been so pasteurized and been made so weak, but he was one of the most powerful thinking individuals of his time. And he was always challenging himself to not only be better, but to understand that even when he was working on something, that after he evaluated it, he called it out for what it was. And he said, we need to do better. We need to move beyond civil rights, and we need to look at economic and power for Black Americans. And that was the most important thing he ever said. But he says here, when evil men plot, good men must plan. When evil men burn and bomb, good men must build and bind. When evil men shout ugly words of hatred, good men must commit themselves to the glories of love. Where evil men would seek to perpetuate an unjust status quo, good men must seek to bring into being a real order of justice. Now, you know, he wrote that many, many years ago, and I've been reading it since I've been closing shows a little bit with this because I have so much I could, but I think that captures the moment.
Yeah.
And that's why I'm asking everybody that's watching this show to join us at the Urban Global Health Alliance, because we're on the ground. We advocate, we educate, and we address public policy and create effective public policy, I believe, that can do what? Protect our body sovereignty, protect our humanity. And I want everybody to come on in and join us at the Urban Global Health Alliance. You can join us at www.urbanglobalhealthalliance.com. Now, over the next several months, you're going to hear people complain about being censored, and you're going to hear people talk about the authorities showing up at their house, and you're going to hear people saying that I can't keep my job if I don't, you know, and take this shot that will clearly change who you are as a human being. If not that day, trust me, for the next several months or the next several parts of your life in a year or two, you will start to see that you are no longer the same person. And I ask everybody to get up from their computers and take a deep breath and stop being keyboard warriors and start to fight back. Cross that river like Harriet Tubman did. Cross that river like Frederick Douglass did. But they didn't cross the river just to be free for us. I mean, free for themselves. They crossed that river to be free for us, to create freedom for us. And now it's our defining moment, Alison. What are we going to do about it? Are we going to stand, or are we going to allow these globalists to take everything from us? Are we going to stand, or allow them to take our children from us? Are we going to stand and allow them to take what our deeper understanding of the universe and God is? Yeah. I love you.
Love you too.
I love your family. Thank you for your courage.
Thank you.
And definitely thank you for your genius. You know, I'm going to be mentally messed up tonight.
You be in virtual reality. Yeah.
Right. And I just want to tell everybody that's listening, go onto our pages, go onto our Facebook pages, go into our websites. Can you tell us where we can find a lot of your work?
Sure. So I have a blog. It's called wrenchinthegears.com. Wrench like the tools, wrenchinthegears.com. And then I also have a YouTube page where I do keep copies of interviews and things. I was just in Salt Lake City area, so I have a bunch of little short interviews of things that or Facebook Lives I did from there, sort of surfacing a lot of these entities. So yeah, you can just look me up at Alison McDowell YouTube and it should come up. It's kind of just a basic page. But those two places are good. And thank you, Kevin. Thank you for, you know, engaging with this material and bringing it to a larger audience, because I do really feel like it is this reckoning with both this past history as much as we talk about military service and patriotism in the concept. It is this legacy of the enslavement, like coming to a reckoning with that, and then and the indigenous, you know, people. So it's those communities that are targeted by the impact markets. And I really feel that it is that voice that should be in a position of shaping this next version of the world that is more just. And, you know, to the extent that I can, you know, share what I know with the community so people can make more informed choices, that makes me feel really good. So thank you.
Well, everybody at home, find your God courage and take a stand. Have a nice evening, everyone.